Hello, Eric and Matthias.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Mauricio.
Hi, Andrea. How are you doing?
Great, thanks, and you?
All good, all good. Summer here in London, so it's getting super warm.
Yeah, it's not as warm as in London here in Wales, but it's pretty good still.
Pretty good. Good stuff, good stuff. Let's wait for the folks to join. I did have the link for the agenda somewhere. If I can find it. Paste it here in the chat. Please do add yourself to that document if you are like in the call, if you want to, of course. Andrea, did you got the email from DevOps World?
I did get an email about accessing the speaker portal, but I was a bit confused because I didn't get the notification about
Being accepted?
being accepted or not.
Yeah, I think that we got the talk accepted. Maybe it was just the email was sent only to me. Let me see if I can forward that to you. So basically, we need to finish this POC to show there, I'm guessing.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Johannes.
Yes, let me forward this to you. Andrea, can you share your personal email with me in the Slack? For some reason, I don't have it in my Gmail. I should, but it's not there. Or your company email, it's the same. Thank you. Good stuff. Okay, should we get started? Thank you everyone for joining. Let's definitely get started with this so we can keep it like short and simple. So I've shared the link for the vocabulary agenda today. If someone has any topic for the agenda, please do add there to that document. It's in the Zoom chat. I will just paste it again. And let me see if I can share my screen quickly so we all see the same document. Here we are. So I've added a couple of topics, and I think that we can get rid of this one. Just a quick update for everyone. We have like merged the Go library. So this is the Go library. That is basically inside the SIG events, CDE, SDK, Go. So that's kind of like where the library, like the cloud events library lives for now. It's early days, so it's pretty hacky. And we expect to be able to improve it, like adding tests and adding, like removing code duplication and making it a little bit better, like by doing the POC that we are planning. I don't know if everyone in the call is aware, but we are building a POC for the DevOps world and also for CDCon, which is next week, I think. So we need to definitely get cracking on. And today I had a meeting with Jürgen and Johannes from Captain to get started on building basically what is called a Captain translator. I think that's basically, Johannes has a diagram there that it's pretty useful. So I think that we will start using those names for now. Johannes, if you can add a link to that diagram, or if you can, share it and add it into a pull request into the repository, I think that will be pretty interesting. I think that will definitely help.
Yes, of course I can do. I was just waiting for getting the first PR merged, but now I can submit a change. And as we discussed already in the chat, I moved the Tecton controller out of this yellow rectangle because it should not be part of that component that takes care of translating CDF events into Captain events.
Sounds good. So basically the POC, for everyone to be aware, I think that it's going to be composed by these components, at least these first two. I would say the last one is definitely optional, and I will not focus on that for now. I guess that until next week, that's not going to happen. But I know that there is some people working also on the Jenkins side, building a plugin for cloud events. So in later iterations, we can definitely include that as well. I wanted to check with Andrea, and I don't know if Viva is not here. I don't know if he's here. No, he's not. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's a bit too late for him to join, but I've been in touch with him. I can provide an update on the Tecton side.
Yep.
So we started an experimental project as part of Tecton, which is a new controller dedicated to sending cloud events. So the project was approved, and we have the project in experimental, and it runs now. It's able at least to send cloud events in Tecton format. So that part is working. Now that the lib from CDF is merged, we can start adding support for SIG events there as well. So I started working on it today, so maybe either me today or Viva tomorrow. Hopefully get that part.
Good.
Yeah.
I think that it's a good time to today, kind of like what we were thinking about, like the Captain translator, like the Captain side. Basically, what we discussed is kind of like a refinement of what we have been discussing previously, without having too many details. Now, at least what I would be expecting from the Tecton side, and this is something that I want to check with you, Andrea, is that to be able to consume CD events. Is that something that can be hacked, at least for next week?
Yeah, I think so. That goes through a component in Tecton called triggers, and that receives generic post over HTTP, and then you can use basically JSON path to extract information from the JSON body. So that's what we do for Tecton events as well. So we just need to create like the binding for this kind of events, and then, but it's YAML based, so there's no Go coding involved in doing that.
But for example, if I want to send an event to Tecton to trigger a pipeline, is that done like in that way?
Basically, Tecton triggers you create a CRD called event listener that sets up a sync. So it gives you a URL, and then you post the cloud event to that URL. And then on Tecton side, for YAML, you set up some rules, filtering rules, and to say, okay, yeah, accept this event and extract this information for this event and start a pipeline with that.
Okay,
so that's part.
Sorry, but the URL you just mentioned, so it's a publicly available URL and secured somehow with an API token, or is it a URL just available inside the cluster where Tecton is running?
It depends how you want to expose it. So if you put an ingress on top, it's available publicly, and yeah. So by default, there's no authentication mechanism inbuilt. But like for GitHub, for GitHub events, you can have a secret. So we have a specific component to validate the secret that comes from GitHub events. So if you have a header that you're sending your GitHub events for authentication, we could try to build something to validate it.
Yeah, I was thinking because we have to somehow send also the cloud event from Captain via the translator as a CD event then to Tecton, I guess. And there has to be somewhere an endpoint where we can send it to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think
yes.
that's the URL that the Tecton trigger will give us basically. And it's inside the cluster. And as a note, I wanted to let Andrea know that inside K3S, we can definitely run Captain. And I'm guessing that we can run Tecton in there as well. So we can have everything inside the same cluster.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Captain,
I'm using. Yeah. I'm using kind of my setup, but it's probably pretty similar. And so far, I'm running Tecton and Knative and something else, and I still have space for running more stuff. So I think it should be fine to run everything in one.
My experience so far with Captain is that you guys are installing a bunch of components and they require some specific configurations. At least looking at the quick start, I didn't like when I looked at the quick start and saw the installed components. I basically said, yeah, I can probably get this working on kind, but I will not spend time now because the quick start basically set up all the components for me and all the routes and also exposes the things outside. I can give it a try to run Tecton in there and see if it kind of like works out of the box. I'm guessing that it will, but yeah. Do we need Knative for something right now if we don't use the brokers, for example, or do we need it for the?
No, we don't necessarily need it.
Okay.
It's just an optional component. I was playing with a Sockeye, which is an application to visualize cloud events for debugging, and it's a Knative application. That's why it's
good stuff. Andrea, so basically what I think that we should build is that if we build a pipeline that basically, creates a container, I mean, I don't know if you have kind of like example pipelines, but basically if we create a pipeline that says it needs to only emit an event saying there's a new artifact, this is the container in it, I can translate that into a Captain event and send that to Captain APIs basically. And that's what I've been kind of like trying to get working on my side. I started today, so I haven't got it running just yet, but I'm pretty close. And if we do that, then basically what Captain is going to send us back is a Captain event saying, that a pipeline is to be triggered in Tecton, and I will translate that back to a CD event that you should be able to pick up with that trigger, in that trigger. So I will just send you that into a trigger, and we should be able to trigger a second pipeline from there.
Okay. What is the end-to-end scenario that we're representing here?
I think that having two pipelines, one build and deploy. So basically one builds like a service, like we just build it from source and create a container, something like that. And the second one is going to basically deploy that into an environment.
Okay, so that's the second Tecton pipeline. And what is Captain role in?
Captain is basically coordinating these two pipelines. So basically deciding what comes next. So basically the build pipeline is going to send an event saying there is a new artifact available, and we will send that to Captain, and Captain will say, okay, what do we do when we have a new artifact? Do we trigger a test? Do we test it for performance, or we just deploy it, right?
Right.
And that's kind of like the orchestration that I would love to show there. Like at least like it's very basic interaction, but I think that it's very powerful because we delegate to Captain to decide what to do next.
Okay, makes sense.
Captain guys, do you think that that's a good idea? Do you think that we can get that done, like event wise and and complexity wise?
I think the use case. You can go first.
No, Johannes, please go first.
The use case makes totally sense. We use the first event to kick off the sequence execution in Captain, but then use Captain as orchestration engine to trigger the deployment, for example, via Tecton. I think the use case wise, it makes totally sense. I have just one technical requirement. that may come up when we go a little bit down the road, because to close or to tell Captain that, for example, a deployment event is finished, Captain needs a reference which trigger was used. And this information, it's just a triggered ID, needs to be stored somewhere. And now my question is whether we can pass it to Tecton, and Tecton then also returns it back to the translation layer, so that the translation layer knows which event to reference, and finally forwards it to Captain, so that then Captain can make the decision, okay, the deployment is done. This is one technical issue that might come up, but apart from that, the use case makes sense and it's totally feasible.
I think from Tecton side, it shouldn't be a problem. I'm just wondering where we store this into the CDE protocol.
I think that that's just metadata, right? Like that Tecton can handle in the meta, like in the Tecton objects, like in pipeline run or task run. And then when we get, well, yeah, that's a good question.
Because,
so it's a custom logic, right? Like it's, how do you extract that ID?
So what I can do in the what I can do on Tecton side, I mean, I can build the CDE events with the headers set as needed. And then in the body, I could put like the entire pipeline, Tecton pipeline, which will include somewhere this ID, but then you need to know where to go and extract it. The alternative would be to define some other body or header where we set this, whatever is easier, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you have an example, Johannes, maybe of the format here?
Sure, I can actually share my screen to show you a running example, and also to get a little bit more details on what I mean exactly. Let me just, yeah, here I have it. All right, here I have on the right side, you can see a sequence execution as orchestrated by Captain. Here, for example, a dev environment, and everything gets kicked on by a sequence triggered event. This is the initial event that gets sent to Captain after a build happened and an artifact is available.
And maybe I just have to clarify here. I think in the last meeting we always called it a new artifact event, but it's actually not called a new artifact event. It's more a triggering of some delivery sequence. So in the first versions of Captain, it was called a new artifact, but it's now more generic, and we just call it the triggering of a sequence that can be triggered because of a new artifact. But this is where we jump into the Captain execution.
Good. Mauricio, this is the event that I sent you today. What you can see here is the image that has been built, and this image we are now going to deploy and test and so on. And this is the first event that gets received by Captain. Then Captain takes a look into a process definition, which step to execute. And the first one in this case is a deployment event. And Captain will send out a so-called SH Captain event deployment triggered. Just to inform then the service that is listening to this event that this task is now going to be started, or you should do your job now. And this event also has a unique ID. It's this one. This is unique. And when then some extension executes upon this event, then they send back a so-called finished event, SH Captain event deployment finished, and they tell us which triggered ID they are referencing. And this ID we need to close, or to make the step, to close the step and to make the decision that everything is now finished, and we go on with the next task in the sequence and do continue. And this ID, I'm a little bit worried about this ID. This one needs to go to Tecton and then back to the translation layer to make the mapping happen.
And I guess also the SH captain context is also.
True. Yeah. The SH captain context is a more generic ID we need just to make sure which events all belong together. But and this one also needs to be passed in. But yeah, when we solve the problem with the triggered ID, then the SH captain context is just a second ID we need to kind of pass through.
Okay. In this case, what I'm thinking is that, Tekton is going to be running some pipelines, sending some CD events without this, right? The first event that we're going to send, it's not going to have this one, right? This is just the second time, or the time that when we get that from Captain, right?
True. The first one does not have this event, this ID. This is totally correct. It just has a unique ID, but this can be any arbitrary number. But also
who generates the context? Yeah,
the API, the Captain API generates this context.
Perfect.
You don't have to worry about that. You just send this payload, and the context is then generated by the API.
So maybe in the translation layer, I can just cache that. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, we would definitely need to figure that out.
But that's very interesting. I think, yeah, we might need to think about some general maybe context field in the protocol that could be used by different application for transporting this kind of information.
Yeah, trace context would be, I think, the way to go there.
Yeah, I think
If I could just add some comment there. I think what we're talking about now is actually how to link events together, how to relate them to each other, right? Either through a common context or through links between the different events that we say are related in some way. So I think that the way to do this in a generic way, Andrea, would be to either have a context or I would say event references between the events, like links that we call them in IFL. So some kind of concept like that should be in the when we have the POC in place and we consider it for the future protocol, we should consider something like that. But let's solve the actual problem now, of course, here, and we can find a general solution later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
This definitely makes me think that we can definitely have like a generic context field right now in CE events to keep this information. But I just don't want to go and change kind of like the entire thing right now. I think that we can just handle that logic in the translation phase and then see if we can propagate it to Tekton and then reuse it whenever we get events from Tekton, and just extract it and generate the new events for Captain in this case.
Is there a generic field in the events where we can just put in like new information? Let's say here in the Captain events, in the data block, anything can go into the data block. So you can just add anything else. Let's say here we have a deployment or project, but if it should be first name and last name, you can just add it there. It's not specified. And if there is also a way how to just define the payload, then maybe like for a temporary solution, we put in also the context data into the payload, and maybe then we can kind of loop it through, or kind of kind of carry it with all the events, and then we just have to make sure that we don't lose the Captain context, the triggered ID, these kind of things we have to take care of. But
right now,
it's a technical implementation. Maybe it cannot be solved right here. I think we have to take a look at how the implementations look like and where we can store, or where we can carry this information so we don't lose it.
There is a GitHub discussion open for this, but we have sort of put it on hold to get the POC delivered first.
All right. Yeah. Any more questions related to the eventing from the Captain end?
Not right now. I will be definitely, writing, like trying to ask questions as they come. Basically, I will try to work with the authentication thing. I think that's almost done. Yeah, of receiving CD events that probably are going to come from Tecton. And I'm guessing that from the Tecton controller, you can define kind of like a sync for that. I have a service basically where you're going to be sending the events. I'm guessing that that's kind of like how it will work. And I will definitely ping Johansen and Jürgen if I have any questions, because yeah, I think that I will just be working tomorrow on at least making sure that Captain can receive the events, and then that I'm formatting in the right way so we can actually see something in the user interface. As I mentioned before, I'm not entirely sure what kind of configurations do I need to do in Captain itself to, for example, configure the sequences.
Okay, let me just show you. What you basically have to do is you create a so-called shipyard file. You need that kind of file when you set up a Captain project. And here is the place where you define the sequence that you want to execute. In my case, yeah, first you have to specify the stages. Here they have a dev stage, a staging, and a production stage. And then within each stage, you have to, or you can configure sequences. And when we take a look at the delivery sequence, this one is then composed of a couple of tasks. And this is then the process or the sequence of tasks that gets executed and orchestrated by Captain, meaning that deployment happens first, then test, evaluation, release, and so on. And this is the way that you configure your Captain project and to set up the sequence you want to execute.
Yes, and then what do I do with that file? So basically, I just apply that, and it will pop up in the Captain user interface.
True. Yeah, you apply that file, or you creating a Captain project. You just reference a shipyard.yaml or any kind of YAML that contains this shipyard specification, and then magically everything is set up correctly, and you're good to go to send a so-called sequence triggered event for delivery, and then the execution starts.
Well, yeah, I thank you for some clarifications there. Whenever I try to do that, I will let you know, and probably I will be needing some help just to make sure that I just start in the with the right step, and not going into like a completely wrong direction and wasting time on things that you can probably solve quite quickly.
Okay, yeah, just ping me and I can help you out.
Andrea, how do we coordinate like the Tecton side now? I mean,
yeah, I can take care of the Tecton side if you want. I mean, we just need to, I guess, have a sample up in a Docker file. If anyone has anyone that would like to use that we can build and deploy easily, or I don't know, I can pick one. And then basically I can set up 2 pipelines, one for the build, which is pretty straightforward, and the second one for the deploy. And I think the main thing for the deploy one is to make sure we have parameter to capture the context that Captain needs, right? And if we output that context back as pipeline results, then you should be able to translate those back into the CD format. One thing that I wanted to mention as well, I mean, if you want the event from Captain to Tecton, it could be in Captain format directly. I mean, it would be nicer if it's in the CDE format, but if you're short on time, we could, for the first POC sake, send it in the in the Captain format, because from Tecton point of view, as long as it's HTTP with a JSON attached, it doesn't matter. I just need to write some JSON path rules, and then can extract the information I need from where I need it.
Yeah, I think that I will give it a try to the translation, because at the end of the day, the translation is just an envelope, right? Like I will just change the event type, but I will probably forward the same data into the cloud event data. So I will just pick the data that's coming in the Captain event, just change the headers basically, and just forward that to Tecton. So at least this CD event, and we have like that going both ways. I will give it a try. If I get stuck or something, I will let you know.
Okay. The other thing, we have a POC folder now on the repo where the initial version of the diagram is. So I think we could use subfolders in there to store the different resources. So I would create like the Tecton pipeline YAML in that folder, in the Tecton folder, and so forth. We could have like a folder for the Captain resources. So we have all the YAMLs together in one place.
Sounds really good. Yep, sounds really good. Let's do that. So if I create any YAML files, I will just push them there. And I had another repository for the translator component, and I will have another repository for the service, like the Captain service, which is basically the one picking up events from Captain and forwarding stuff to Tecton. So there are like two separate components that we can merge in the future. That's something that we discussed before. But yeah, I will just start like that for simplicity's sake. And then when I have it running, then we can decide if we want to merge, where do we want to put them, and all that stuff.
Extra repo. So you have one extra repo for the translation?
Yes. And then there is something else that it's called service in Captain, which is basically kind of like a listener for the Captain events. So it's one that it's basically, it's like the translator is sending events into Captain, and this service is picking events from inside Captain and deciding where to send them out.
Okay, and that's a configuration on Captain side, or is a actual service, Kubernetes service?
It is like a component that needs to run. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it runs with the proxy, right? Like it runs with another container, like it's sidecar as well. Something called like a distributor or something like that.
True.
Yes.
Yeah. A distributor is the component that listens for subscriptions and receives the event and just forwards it to localhost to send it over to the service.
Mm-hmm. So let's keep it simple for now. I know that it sounds complex, but I will just choose very, very simple, Go projects. I will make the connections. I will test them to see if they work. And as soon as I have that, I will definitely start pinging you, Andrea, to see if I can install Tecton and just get everything in one place.
Yes, great. As soon as you have one example of the cloud events that Tecton will be receiving, please send it to me so I can set up the trigger accordingly.
Perfect. Do we have any, like, what are kind of like the deadlines that we have just for me to get ready?
Yesterday?
Yeah, I know. Yep, that's one that I'm fully aware, but yeah, I have some of the stuff to do this week, so I just want to make sure that I plan to have enough time to finish kind of like the first version of this. But I'm guessing that because of the urgency of this, tomorrow I will be working on this full day, and Thursday I might be able to do the same. So I will just keep pinging people and and asking for help.
Right. Cool.
Good stuff. We do not have any slides for any of this stuff. So the more that we can add to the POC with diagrams and explanations, now that we kind of like discuss the use case, I think that we are all kind of like aware of how it should work. If people can help like filling in kind of like the the repository, like the README and all that stuff, explaining what we're trying to achieve, that will be super helpful to create then a presentation, for example.
Is there already a dedicated time slot or when we want to present it?
I think that there is.
So we have the Birds of a Feather session. We're not really there to present the POC, but it would be nice to at least be able to mention the POC. But of course, it doesn't have to be done. We're not going to demo it anyway. But that would be Wednesday afternoon next week's European time. So that would be the. I'm not sure when the DevOps thing you mentioned before when that is, but that is a bit further into the future, I gather.
I don't know. I think that we need to basically record the presentation for DevOps World, and I will check the deadlines. Probably let me do that tomorrow just to make sure that we have enough time. Usually, if they do recordings, they have kind of like a week to do the recordings, and I'm assuming now that that's the more strict deadline that we will have, because we will need to have a presentation and being able to record that with the demo.
Yeah. So I'm almost afraid to open my mouth because I have a tendency in this group to not deliver what I commit to, but I do work a lot with presentations. So I will pinch myself really hard and really try to help with that part. And I'll set up some expectations on myself and maybe deliver this time. That would be nice.
Thank you, Eric. That's highly appreciated. And again, maybe like the presentation itself is one thing that we can start working together. Based on the content on the repository, right? Like, so if we have like a POC README there, let's add more content in there, and then creating like the slides is pretty straightforward.
Exactly. So that's also something I would like to do. I'm not going to get it super correct the first time, but like
that's
try
right.
to describe the POC in text in a README file. I think that's why it's been important for me that I'm listening in today to understand, like, to be able to write some text.
If you have questions, or if you want to have a chat, or if you want to jump into a Zoom call to discuss more, let's do it, because I think that we will be figuring out stuff while we work on it.
Yes, absolutely. Sounds great.
Great. Any other topics for today?
I just saw that because I do have a session at CDCon next week, and it should be right before the Birds of Feather session. So I'm happy to join there as well.
Great.
And you can make some PR for the Birds of Feather session, because there are apparently 4 of them going on in parallel, and we of course want people to join the right one, so to say.
Yes.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay, fellas. I will definitely jump into coding mode now. So if there are no other topics to discuss, we can always keep chatting into Slack.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep. Andrea, any other thing?
Nothing from me.
Yep. Emil?
I just want to wish you the best of luck to conclude this POC for the next week.
Oh my God, it's going to be intense.
Sounds
That's why we like
fascinating and interesting.
That's why we like coding, right? Like, and I think this, like, I'm super happy that we reached to a point where when we are hacking now, not discussion.
Exactly, yeah.
Discussions are good, but now we will have something to discuss on top. So that, I think that's definitely a big step forward.
Perfect. So good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's stay in touch. I will definitely bother some people.
Yeah, thanks, Mauricio.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.